if you have had to clean up your resume, or freshen up your LinkedIn profile recently, then you've probably had to remember, recall, and list what you believe are your most significant accomplishments and contributions to your previous company, your current employer. You say, this is the stuff that I think really matters. These are the things, the tasks that I did, the things that I finished that brought change or improvement to my last organization or work group. Here's what I can do to make your company better. These are my biggest accomplishments. I graduated this many students. I pulled in this much revenue. I ran this many accounts. I got to help heal this many people. These are the things that we have to list to get the next job. But I also think we do it and look at that and think about that, hoping that our work matters and counts and stands out and really lasts and endures. Maybe we look at those lists of accomplishments and say, I hope that has some impact and made some kind of difference. Or leave some kind of legacy, I think we think about that. But do we honestly know what impact that stuff has? All that hard work, will it go beyond just getting an interview? Does it last beyond that? Do we know what effect it will have in the scope of eternity, of foreverness? Do we know how much, if at all, our accomplishments are going to alter or change, impact history? I think Ecclesiastes today says, no, you don't really know. You can't really affect eternity, so let's stop trying and worrying about it. Just fear God. Enjoy your work. Just enjoy your work. Just eat good, and appreciate all of that, all life, as a gift from Him. Now, I realize that thought might strike some of us, that saying might strike some of us as a real downer. Like, really? You just kind of knocked the wind out of all my work and accomplishment. I'm not trying to do that. But I hope as we study this passage today, we're going to actually find it more of a relief, a realistic relief, taking some pressure off of us from trying to put the whole company on our back. We're trying to save the whole world with our work. You know what I mean? It's actually a relief. It frees us up to simply enjoy the tasks that God has put in front of us, the work that He has given us to do. That's what Ecclesiastes 3 is saying, I believe, today. This is our third week studying Old Testament wisdom literature. I've had a lot of fun preaching this. I hope it's been fun, helpful, refreshing for you too. Somebody told me last week I might be having too much fun preaching wisdom literature. This is our second week studying in wisdom literature what it has to say about work. Last week was Proverbs, was work in Proverbs, hard work. Next week will be Psalms. We'll look at restful work in Psalms, and this week is Ecclesiastes. And as we did with Proverbs, I think it might be helpful to look at a few quick thoughts, I'll put these on the screen, that can explain what Ecclesiastes is about and help us figure out how to approach it so that we know how to read this book. It's a hard book. So here are a handful of tips and targets that should help us understand what Ecclesiastes is saying and doing, how it's constructed, all of that. Here's how to read Ecclesiastes. First of all, we should know that Ecclesiastes contains, the majority of it, contains a bunch of teaching from somebody who has been through it all. They're at the end of their life. It's from a seasoned veteran type character who has been thinking about these issues for their whole life, and they're looking back on life, being really reflective and contemplative. They're entertaining questions and conclusions that sound like, man, life really is as up and down as you think it is. There's a lot of disappointment. There's a lot of confusion in life. We all know this. Ecclesiastes is just affirming it. It seems like everything is meaningless. What's the point of all this, A lot of life just happens to you, and it seems all out of your control. Ecclesiastes touches that stuff. And all those thoughts and feelings, Ecclesiastes said, are just normal for human life. It's normal. You're going to bump into that. So it's authentic and realistic. It's not lying to you, If you feel like life is disappointing, Ecclesiastes sits there with you and says, yeah, that's going to happen. It's going to come up. If you're looking for smiles and sunshine, this probably isn't your book, okay? But also, if you think Christianity is all about smiles and sunshine, then you should probably read Ecclesiastes. It might bring you back down a little bit and have a more realistic, authentic view of what life really is under the sun, as Ecclesiastes says. It doesn't want you to have false hope. It wants to let you know you're going to have some disappointments and some confusion in life. It's authentic and realistic. Also, it's a real technical term. Ecclesiastes is wisdom literature, but it feels very different from Proverbs. If you've read it before, or when you do read it, you'll notice that. Proverbs is real nuggety wisdom. Here's a helpful tip. Here's another helpful tip. Here's another. Ecclesiastes is constructed very differently. That's because it's monological, one person speaking, and it's speculative. It's kind of exploratory, and it's asking big questions. It's reflective and contemplative. Proverbs, on one hand, gives prudential wisdom, helpful, instructive nuggets. Do this, and this will probably happen. Next sentence. Do this, and this will probably happen. Ecclesiastes is saying, hey, you could do everything in Proverbs, and you're still going to have some frustrations and disappointments. You can do everything in Proverbs, and your life still might be kind of, you might have some bummers sometimes, Job does that too. The book of Job teaches us how to suffer. It does that too, but in a dialogical way, where there are multiple characters interacting with each other. It's a conversation. So it's not nuggety wisdom, tweet type pieces of wisdom, but it's a speaker just sharing his contemplative, reflective thoughts on life with us. That's what it means by monological, speculative wisdom. It feels different. It might feel kind of discouraging, but it's really just a different type of wisdom. Is it really that much of a downer, though? Is it as bad as we think? Well, this is important to keep in mind. There are two voices in Ecclesiastes, and there's a preacher-teacher character. You'll see that phrase come up a lot, but there's also a narrator, a framer narrator, like in the beginning of a movie, a fairy tale movie or a story, where somebody says, "Once upon a time," that's the narrator, and then the movie or the book unfolds, the story happens, and at the end of that, you get the narrator come back in and say, "And here's the point of all of that." Does that make sense? That's kind of how Ecclesiastes is constructed. You'll see in chapter 1 and chapter 12, there's that narrator who opens and closes and tells you what the big point is. And in the middle, you've got all this teacher content. The teacher says this, teacher says that, I found this to be true about life. There are two voices, and it's important to remember that. And in the end, the narrator person comes back in and says, everything the teacher has said is right, but... but. There's a big but at the end, okay? It says, life is hard, but it's not all meaningless, okay? Yes, life can be depressing and discouraging, but ultimately, the narrator says, let that remind you to fear God, to obey his commandments, and to view him as judge, to treat him as the ultimate judge. Fear, obey, and let God be the judge. This is really interesting. What is the narrator saying there? I think one really helpful proposal that popped up in my study that I really like, and I think this makes a ton of sense. Those three words, fear God, obey his commandments, and let him be judge, are shorthand for the three components of the Hebrew Old Testament. The law, you obey that. The prophets, they are announcing God's judgment. You let God be judge. And fearing God, that's what wisdom literature is all about. So what I think the narrator, are you with me on this? What I think the narrator is doing is say, read Ecclesiastes with an eye on the rest of the Bible. Don't just sit with this guy's depressing conclusions and downer points, life is meaningless. Yeah, you have those moments, but there's more to Scripture than that. I think that's what the narrator's saying. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, that's a big key for how to read Ecclesiastes. And I hope in this message today that I do a good job incorporating that perspective into today's study. Into our study today, which picks right up in the middle of that speculative wisdom of the teacher. His exploration of time, history, eternity. He's trying to figure all that out. How does time work? How does eternity work? And he has just written that song. It's an oldie song, actually, written by the Byrds. Turn, turn, turn. There's a time for this. There's a time for that. You know that song. And it's actually a poem in Ecclesiastes that says there's a time for this and a time for that. Now, right after that poem is our passage today. We're exploring time, and now we're looking at what impact our work has on time, on eternity, on all of history. Make sense? That's where we're at today. And it's asking the question, does my work affect any of that? Does it have any bearing on history? Can I impact eternity? Can it change all these events that God seems to have prearranged? It's asking that question. and answering that question. So we're looking at the teacher's reflections on toil and time. Our work now in the context of God's work in eternity, his timeline. In short, Ecclesiastes 3:9-15 is asking, in light of God's arrangement of eternity, what is my work worth? We can neither affect it nor understand God's eternal work, so we just need to settle down and enjoy what's in front of us as a gift from God. That's what this is teaching. So the fact that we can't add to or subtract from God's eternal work, Ecclesiastes says that should humble us and cause us to revere, fear, worship, be in awe of God. Put simply, look at it this way. Because our work can't affect eternity, just enjoy it as a gift from God. Our work can't alter eternity, but it can be enjoyed as a gift from God. And that's what we're talking about today, enjoying our work as a gift from God. The first two verses that were read for us today dig into that question, what is my work worth in the economy of eternity? If everything has its appropriate time, there's a season for all these things, and it's all ultimately controlled by God, how am I contributing? What part does my hard work, your hard work, play in the scope of history? Can I influence or change the timing of all these events that seem to be prearranged by God? It's a big question, big philosophical question. Should I even go to work tomorrow if none of it really matters? Okay? That's what verses 9-11 are taking us through. Let's look back down at that and read 9-11. What does the worker gain from his toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on men. He's made everything beautiful in its time. He's also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Can my work change God's work? That's the question of these verses. And in these verses, you might be picking up some hints of Genesis 1-3. Think about that for a second. You might be picking up some echoes of the beginning of the Bible. Think back to the creation story. You know it. Okay? God made everything and said it was good. He arranged everything beautifully, right? Adam and Eve messed it up with sin, with disobedience. They wanted to be as smart as God, get them all figured out, know everything that he knew, right? And they disobeyed his command, and now we are under a curse, which makes work hard, makes it a burden. It makes it sweaty and difficult and painful and slow. That's Genesis 3, right? You know that. And now, still under that curse, we, and so does the teacher in Ecclesiastes, we want to see if we can still tap into these things that God controls, influence eternity, and figure out what God is really doing. Kind of the same story, you know? And we want to know if our work can impact God's work and his timing. Part of that is good, it's okay. We want to hold on to it. And part of it we need to really let go of. Sort that out. On the one hand, God has put this awareness of eternity in us. That's a good thing. But on the other hand, we can't comprehend it and we can't affect it. So we need to let go of our efforts to try to do that. So while we definitely want to keep our awareness of eternity and God's action throughout history, we need to let go of that desire to affect, alter, change, control eternity, and just settle down. Just settle down and realize that God is in charge of all of that. He gets to set the clock, not us. He gets to call the plays, not us. He organizes history, his story, from beginning to end, beautifully, as verse 11 you saw says, not us. And we Christians are cool with that. We're good with that. It's meant to calm us down. It's meant to humble us. It's meant to make us more aware of our mortality and our limitation and cause us to admit our lack of control. I can't affect all this stuff. It's meant to point out in our hustle and bustle, our huffing and puffing at work, that's not supposed to make us look more important and feel more in control, but it's supposed to do the opposite and just reveal God's sovereignty. He is important. He is in control. You see that? I can't affect all this stuff. My work doesn't affect as much as I think it does, but God's does. That's the point of this. It's supposed to reveal God's sovereignty. So this Q&A, verses 9-11, are helping us to embrace our limitations and be in awe of God for his foresight, his creative power, his eternality, his ultimate control. This feels kind of philosophical, abstract, distant, spacey so far. That's fine. We got to deal with that stuff. But we might be wondering, how does this impact what I do Monday through Saturday? What do I do with this tomorrow morning when I go to work, Well, 3 ideas. You might be absolutely overwhelmed with all you have to do tomorrow. All your classroom prep teachers, all your patient checklists that you've got to work through, nurses and caregivers, all the emails that have just smashed your inbox over the weekend. They came on Friday at 5, right as you were leaving, Think of that as something that God has given you, even though it overwhelms you. Even though you might feel like it's impossible to catch up, it's impossible to get all that done, or to even know how is this stuff paying off. I'm just barely treading water, And be reminded that when we feel out of control, God is the one who can stay organized in all that chaos. God is the one who's got it totally kept together, especially when we feel like our schedule, our task lists are just overtaking us. So in those overwhelmed moments, which Ecclesiastes says, we should have. It's part of life. We take that moment and say, yeah, God, you're super in control. I realize that I'm not. Let me point that to you. Okay? That's one idea. Second idea, you might feel like you're not making a lot of gains at work. This verse 9 says, what gain does man have from all his toil? What gain do people get from all my hard work? You might feel like you're not making a lot of gains at work in the big scheme of things. It just keeps piling up, or you keep falling short, never finish. Let this encourage you. Keep chipping away, worker. Keep chipping away. And keep trusting that God has already beautifully arranged something out of those ups and downs of your career. Trust that He can use what feels like sometimes gains, sometimes losses. And He can make something out of all that stuff in the ups and downs, the gains and losses. When we seem to be all out of ideas and energy, and this doesn't even make sense to me, and I'm just blasted by all this, overwhelmed. Think of it this way: if God can make the world out of nothing, if He can make people out of dust, if He can make life out of death, then He can make something out of your chaos at work and your ups and downs, right? Yeah. So let that stabilize you in your successes, failures, gains, losses, ups and downs at work. Okay, third idea. At work, we're often thinking beyond the moment that we're in right now. We're trying to escape the current task and move on to the next thing, really quickly. And sometimes we can be too long distance oriented, too preoccupied with eternity, always trying to zoom out and see the bigger picture. And that's, it's appropriate sometimes. But sometimes we need to just zoom in and focus. What I mean is that, when you're working overtime, when you're feeling exhausted and burned out, we're saying, I just need a break. I almost want to quit my job. I don't know if I can keep doing this. I got to go find something else. I'm always looking for the next thing. On the other end, when we're unemployed, when our company's on strike, we're like, oh man, I got to get a job. I can't wait to get back to work. You see that? We have these ups and downs, and in both situations, we can just focus on what God has put in front of us rather than trying to skip ahead to the next thing. Quit zooming out, escaping the moment, getting carried away by what was or what could be. And just work on on the task that He has given you at the moment. Okay? So, all this is asking and answering the question, can my work affect eternity? No. What we've seen so far is no. Only God's work can. But remember, we're supposed to read Ecclesiastes with an eye to the rest of the Bible, right? So that because of the coming, the life, death, resurrection of Jesus, the bestowal of the Spirit, God gives us work to do in His kingdom, doesn't He? And He chooses to use that work however He wants. Our work is not worthless in Christ, but it's not we who affect eternity. It is God who changes, alters, organizes eternity, and He can use our work in eternity, in His kingdom, as He pleases. We know that. But we don't always know when He's using us or how He might use us. We're often surprised when we find out, that work, that contribution, God did use that to make some eternal impact on somebody's life. But we don't get to take credit for that. We don't get to act like, I controlled all that stuff. And we always need to give God credit for His work, to use our work to make any impact. It's always God who gets the credit there. We might want our work to matter throughout eternity, but we can't even comprehend or understand it. It's so beyond us. So let's just focus on what's in front of us. That's what this is saying. And admit that we are so much more limited than we'd like to be. Yet appreciate that God is more unlimited than we can ever imagine. That's what Ecclesiastes 3, 9-11 is teaching. Is that it, though? Is that all there is to say about work? Do I just go to work tomorrow, do my job, think about God more? Those are good things to do. You should do that. Is it just saying, suck it up, get it done, and thank the Lord? Those are good. But our next two verses are going to say, no, there's a bit more to it than that. There's a little bit more to this work conversation. Our work is meant to be enjoyed. Let's talk about that. Look for that in verses 12 to 13, and we'll unload that. Look at 12. Down in your Bibles. I know that there is nothing better than for men, for people, to be happy and do good while they live. That everyone may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all his toil. This is the gift of God. What was your first job? Think about that for a second. What was your very first job? Did you enjoy that job? Or was it a tough, gritty, unpleasant kind of job? My first job was at Wendy's, the fast food place. I hope we're okay with a little bit of a potty story, because that's what's coming. So, I hope you enjoy it. On one hand, I really enjoyed making sandwiches and salads and burgers. I honestly did. Cleaning even, talking to customers, interacting with my coworkers. I enjoyed all that. It was actually a really fun job. And it was a nice, clean, well-run, restaurant. It was not there were no gross horror stories that you hear from some fast food restaurants. It was great. I enjoyed it. I think I made $5.35 an hour. That's how long ago that was. Minimum wage. I really did like it. I was proud of it. I took pleasure in it. And that was a gift from God. But probably like your first job, or maybe some of your current jobs, there were moments that maybe we don't always enjoy, okay? Some ups and downs and some rough situations that in the moment you're like, I don't see how this is any fun. Okay, so for example, one day, my boss said, Danny, I was Danny at the time, Danny, I have some bad news. I need you to get a mop bucket, some full-length gloves, and a mask. Oh boy. Okay, and go check out the bathroom. So I do that, and I go to the bathroom, and my goodness, I'm sorry, somebody exploded in there. Like I'd never seen before. Like you wouldn't believe. On the sink, on the urinal, on the floors, on the ceiling. It was like, what happened, man? So I'm all dressed up for this hazmat type project, and there's like half inch of like standing muddy water on the floor. It was just unbelievable, absolutely wrecked. And I think it took about an hour and a half to clean that whole thing out. I'm not just trying to be gross, but you walk into a situation like that, and some of you with rough jobs, dirty jobs, know what I'm talking about. You're like, oh my goodness, how do you enjoy that? Disaster, Did I enjoy it? No, not really in the moment. I enjoy telling you about it now. I enjoy it in retrospect because it's hilarious. I enjoy laughing about it. I enjoy that I got paid for it. What would that be? About $8 to do that, That's okay. I enjoyed that my boss appreciated it. I knew he was really stressed out by that. He was so mad. He said, I might even call the cops. This is vandalism. So, settle down, Jeremy, But looking back on this, I enjoyed some aspects of it. I enjoyed that idea of turning a war zone back into a usable bathroom. I can take pride and some pleasure in that. So even when you have those unenjoyable moments at work, and a lot of you have stories like this, I'm sure, at the hospital or in the classrooms, you can expect that there are usually things about those tasks that you can enjoy, in fact. Overall, it might be a gross, difficult, really hard situation. It's just a mess, but there's something to enjoy about that. You can expect to enjoy parts of it then, or you can expect to enjoy it in the future, tomorrow. You can look back on it and say, okay, that wasn't that bad. Our work is meant to be enjoyed. That's what I'm saying. That's what this is saying. You might say, I know that my work is meant to be enjoyed. I know I'm supposed to do that. But I'm usually just trying to survive, just trying to keep my head above water, just trying to make it to the end of the day and clock out and get through this terrible project that I hate, thinking about what's for lunch or what's on Netflix tonight, just trying to get through it. So tell me how do I enjoy my work when it doesn't feel enjoyable most of the time? Tell me how. Well, I wonder if we could enjoy our work more if we simply knew where to look for enjoyment. That's kind of what's behind the Hebrew in this passage, actually. What does it say there in verse 13? Everybody may eat and drink and find satisfaction. Hebrew, it actually says that we may see good. That we may see good. We got to look for it. You got to go hunt for it. I think we need a little bit of a scavenger hunt, shopping list type of thing for what we should be enjoying. We need enjoyment. We need to be able to look for enjoyment and know what our targets are, know what's on the list. We got to look for it. So here's a handful of situations in our workday where I think we might be able to find more enjoyment. And I know this is not comprehensive. After this, I sincerely want to ask you, email me. I want to add to this. I would love to have 5 slides full of this stuff. But here are a few ideas to just kind of get us started. I think we can enjoy accomplishment. Whatever the task is, you can enjoy getting it done. You know, when you turn your project in, you clock out, maybe before you sprint off to the next task, just take a second to enjoy that sensation of checking a box off your task list. Enjoy that moment of getting something done and accomplishing it, finishing it, handing in a deliverable. That's worth enjoying. Sense of accomplishment can be very satisfying. You can enjoy progress. You know, sometimes it feels like, my team is moving at a snail's pace. Enjoy the inch. Enjoy the inch. Sometimes you hit a big milestone. Enjoy the mile. You know, enjoy any forward progress. Enjoy the progress. Celebrate it. Look for it. You can enjoy improvement. Taking a bathroom from a war zone back to a usable bathroom. You know, if you're in a really bad job and you get to help make it a little less bad tomorrow, that's a win. That's improvement. Great job. Enjoy that. Celebrate that. That's a win. If it seems like you've only got problems and crises and conflicts and you get to work through just one of those or take a step forward in any of those, thank God for that opportunity to improve a situation and celebrate and enjoy that moment. You can enjoy helping another person, making a cranky customer's day a little bit more pleasant. You can celebrate and enjoy that. Counseling, letting somebody unload their emotional burden, giving a baby a fresh diaper. You're helping that baby, you know? Filling your family's dresser drawers with clean clothes. That is helpful. We need that. When you get that stuff done, take a minute to enjoy your contribution to somebody else's life. You helped them. Celebrate and enjoy that. Look for that enjoyment in those moments. You can enjoy the people at your workplace. There might be nothing enjoyable about your work at all. This is just horrible. But the people, find one person to invest in. And by the way, I'm sorry if your work is like that. I realize there are just some jobs out there that are so hard and so not fun. I apologize. I'm sorry. But find a person that you could start a positive relationship with. That's a gift from God. Invest in that person. Laugh with that person. Listen to that person. Remember their birthday. You know, let them be a part of the part of your work that you enjoy. We can enjoy people in our work. You can enjoy being able to provide for your family. Maybe you're grinding at this hard steel mill type of work, you know, that it doesn't have a lot of positivity or happiness. When you're driving home at the end of the day, just exhausted, you know, enjoy that fact that God has given you a way to meet the needs of the people that you love the most. That's worth enjoying. Providing for other people, your family, that's a gift. Last, I hope you can add to this list later, but the last one I have today, so supporting your church, enjoying the ability to support your church. I've heard somebody, actually one of our leaders, say that they are grateful for their work for the reason that it enables them to give to the Lord and support the church. That is just beautiful to me. I have so much respect and gratitude for that. Even if you don't enjoy answering every email or phone call and putting out fires and dealing with problems, that job, assuming that you're giving to the church, is benefiting a whole community of believers, a whole region. That God is using those resources to do His work. And that is worth enjoying. You're investing yourself, your resources, your heart into your church. Enjoy that. It is worth enjoying your work because you can support your church. This is not just a list of fluffy optimism. That's not me. That's not my style. That's not what Ecclesiastes is trying to do. It's saying enjoying work in these ways and a million more ways is truly a gift from God. Look for it. See good in your work. Enjoy your work. I'm sure you could add some things to this list, and I really mean that. Please email me. I think my email's on the front of the bulletin, like all the elders. At least, if not, my phone number is, website, whatever. Find it. I would love to add ideas to this list and post them on our Facebook page. I hope that's a helpful resource to people. I'd love to hear one thing that you enjoy about your work that wasn't on this list. Can you share that with me? I would love to see that, honestly. There's a lot to enjoy about our work. Maybe we just need to look for it. Okay? So far, we have learned that our work cannot affect, alter, change eternity. That's verses 9 to 11. In these most recent verses we just read, 12 to 13, we saw that our work is meant to be enjoyed as a gift from God. We just need to look for it. And in our work is also meant to push us into a posture of reverence before God. Verses 14 to 15 are going to show us that. In other words, because eternity is so far out of our control and our comprehension, our only appropriate response is to stand in awe before the one who totally gets it and totally rules over it. Because our work is so limited, yet God's is so unlimited. It's only right to revere God. Let's see if verses 14 to 15 make that point. Go ahead and look back down at verse 14. Teacher says, I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing taken from it. God does it so that men will revere him. Whatever is has already been, and whatever will be has been before. And God will call the past to account. If you've got a different version in front of you, you might see some different wording at the end of verse 15 there. Let me put a few other options up in a second. I want to humbly propose that the last part of verse 15 should be understood, should probably say something like, God seeks what is pursued. God seeks what is pursued. I'm not going to walk through all the Hebrew on that, but look at these other versions really quick. NASB says God seeks what has passed by. ESV says, you might have this in front of you, God seeks what has been driven away. The Lexem English Septuagint, which is an English version of the Greek version of the Hebrew version, which is actually really helpful. God seeks out the thing that is pursued. I think it should say God seeks what is pursued. That's the idea of the end of 15. It's a tricky verse, but I think the point is just worth looking at. The point is that it's saying God manages time in a way that none of us can. He looks after the things that we only chase after. Only God can find the things that seem to evade us and slip out of our grip. Does that make sense? God pursues the things that have been driven away. God seeks what is pursued. This eternity thing that we are chasing after, our pursuit of influence over us, it's always getting away from us. We're pursuing it, and we can't quite get there, but God can. I think that's what this is saying. The events of the past, the things that have already been driven into history, or that are so far off in the future, God can bring those things back around to occur again. Does that make sense? I think that's what this is saying. God can grab the things that seem to slip out of our grip. I think that's the point. I think that verse 14 probably sets that up too. Whatever God does lasts forever, and you can't add to it or detract from it. That's a very humbling thing, and God does this so that people would fear him or revere him, approach him, and view him with profound awe and respect. Appreciate that he is so infinitely superior, and we need to know our place before him. He has this ability that we don't have. He can get after the stuff that we can't. He can control the things that are out of our control. And so we revere him. That's what this is saying. So practically, this means that when we have those moments when we're all geared up and plowing through our tasks, we're trying to take over the world, pause and remember this. Our work is meant to help us revere God. When we have those thoughts like, if I don't do it, nobody else will. Nobody around here can do this as good as me. Settle down, buddy, Get off the high horse and let those moments of work point to, it's really only God who can do that. When we think, maybe subconsciously, if I don't do this, the church will crumble. The kingdom won't advance. That's ridiculous. No. Listen to the teacher in Ecclesiastes, keeping those thoughts in check and say, that's not what your work is that's not the conclusion your work is supposed to bring you to. It's supposed to point you to reverence before God and say, I can't really control this. Only God can. When your work gets messed up, when your deal gets turned down, when your sale doesn't go through, when your idea just gets ignored, be appropriately humbled. And realize, my work is some kind of fleeting characteristic to it. Something just kind of comes and goes, and it doesn't always, shake the earth. And for that reason, I need to be impressed that God's work does. I'm impressed with the permanence and eternality of God's work when mine just gets brushed aside and kicked over. When we don't want our success at work to puff us up, nor do we want our failures at work to crush us, smash our heart. So instead of either of those things, just let your work point to his work and take a knee and respond in reverence and fear and bow in awe before God. That's what our work is supposed to be doing, helping us revere God. We need to keep working hard, but we need to think less of ourselves and more of God. Our work is meant to help us revere God. We need to see our work as God's gift to us, this passage is teaching, and look for enjoyment in it. And third, in this passage we saw that we need to know that our work does matter and God can use it, but let Ecclesiastes draw a line on our self-importance, and I can take over the world and affect everything. It's not as lasting as we think it is, but God's is. God's work is. Your work can't alter eternity, but God's does. So let's just enjoy our work and bow before him in fear and reverence. That's what Ecclesiastes 3 is saying to us. I want to wrap up with this. How does this point us to the gospel? Where is Jesus in all of this? For those of us who are working hard to change eternity, for those of us who are working to feel important, to fix the world, for those of us who are working to pay off our debt to God, for those of us who are working to earn our salvation, for those of us who are working for God's favor and love, or for those of us who are working in just complete arrogance and ignorance, without regard for God at all, for all of us in those situations, just stop. Let Ecclesiastes say, just stop. There's only one man whose work can change eternity, whose work is great, is the great and ultimate gift to us, whose work moves us to reverence before God, whose work we can enjoy forever more than our own. That man's work earned our salvation. That man's work paid our debt. That man's work balanced the scales, turns the key to the vaults of God's unending love and faithfulness, and draws us back to him in reverence before him. That's the work of Jesus Christ. You know this, the Son of God, who came to earth, who lived perfectly, who died unfairly, who rose victoriously out of the grave to buy our freedom and forgiveness, to graciously give us new life, eternal life with him, and will one day come again to finish his work of restoration and redemption, reclaiming and recreating the world, lifting that curse of hard, sweaty, painful work that we're all under, that Ecclesiastes points to, inviting us not to just enjoy our work for eternity, in newness and eternality for him, but to enjoy God and his work and his presence forever. To him be the glory, the honor, and the power. Who can accomplish that work and who has done that work? Let's rest in that. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us work. We realize we need it, but we really want to have the right perspective on it, Lord. Please don't let us use our work to puff up our sense of self-importance or to be under the illusion that we can affect eternity or fix all the problems of the world. We can't, Lord. That's up to you. So we want to submit our work to you. We want to use our work to the temporariness, the fleetingness of our work, the impermanence of our work, the lack of control, sometimes the disappointment that we feel in our work, to just see you and the permanence of your work, the ultimate control in your work, Lord, how you have beautifully arranged and done work to control eternity throughout all of history in ways that we can't even fathom. Lord, help us to not be arrogant and prideful with our work, but to be humble before you, to look to you and just be in awe of what you've done. Also, Lord, help us to enjoy the work that you've given us. May your Spirit guide us to see all these possibilities for enjoyment in the work that you have given us and the task that you've laid on us. We want to do that to your praise, to your glory, so that you get the attention, so that you get the credit, so that you get the thanks. And Lord, ultimately, may we rest in the work of Christ, the finished work of Christ, who died on our behalf to work for and earn our salvation, to pay the debt that none of us could ever pay with our work. We stand firm in that work, Lord, and acknowledge that that is what changed eternity. That is what really matters. That's what we ultimately enjoy forever. Thank you for that gift, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.